This is 3 Shots In.
So for this story, we're going all the way back
to
November of 2021. So like really not long ago at all. Okay. So January of 2021, fashion designer Thalissa Nunes Dourado, she was 27.
Okay.
Decided to move from Sao Paulo, where she was born. This is in Brazil. Mm-hmm. Okay. Moved from Sao Paulo, where she studied fashion, where she worked in fashion, you know, and she was going to live with her mom and her, like in the same area as her mom and her grandmother. Her family had moved during the like beginning of the pandemic to Paraty.
Okay.
Like Paraty, Paraty.
Alrighty.
Okay, this is on the Costa Verde of Rio de Janeiro.
The Green Coast.
Of Rio. They say it's like of Rio, but it's like 250 kilometers away from Rio. So I don't know how close that actually is.
Okay. Well, maybe Rio de Janeiro isn't Rio de Janeiro the capital?
I think Sao Paulo is the capital.
Is the capital?
Rio, I think, is the biggest city.
Okay.
I could be wrong though. I don't fucking know.
Maybe it's a district as well or something.
This was all translated from Portuguese to English. And that's what I got my notes from. So some things might sound weird.
Okay.
But, you know, just roll with it. So this city, Paraty, had a pretty small, but pretty big, about 50,000 people. And her family, Thalissa, had sought like a quiet life. They knew it was safe here. You know, it wasn't a big place with danger and murder because Brazil has like one of the highest rates of murder in the world.
We talked about that during the live, actually.
We did. In 2018, there was like almost, I think 56,000 plus homicides.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Crazy.
It is. I think it was, I read a thing once that the number of murders in Brazil are more than all of like the US and Europe combined.
Whoa.
Or something. That might be an exaggeration, but it was something crazy like that.
Okay.
Like Brazil's got a lot of murder going down.
Okay.
Not that we necessarily have murder here though. So anyway, 11 months later after moving, Thalissa was found dead.
Oh no.
That's right. So listen, I'm not going to tell you how she was found dead yet.
Okay.
We will get there because I want you to hear the story first. Okay.
Okay.
So Thalissa, she studied fashion at the European Institute of Design in city I can't pronounce, Sao Paulo.
Okay.
She actually did a course completion in Paris, right?
Course completion?
Like she studied abroad
for
fashion
I mean,
stuff
it was, yeah.
in Paris. And since then she had become like very specialized. She worked as a stylist for famous Brazilian brands. She worked for Ricardo Almeida, which means nothing to us, but that's like a huge fashion name in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so the Brazilians listening are like, oh my God, what? You know?
Ricardo?
Yeah. Anyway, they participated in market research development. She made many pilot pieces and prototypes of clothes that she launched into like other brands. She was big. Like she was
So super big deal.
She was kind of a big deal in the fashion world in Brazil. And in addition to having a very prominent career in fashion, she was also very detail oriented. Her schedule was never off. Everything was organized.
Like a,
right?
a punctual person.
Very punctual.
She showed up at the time she said she was going to.
Mm-hmm. While also being one of the most creative people that a lot of people said she's the most creative person they've ever met, blah, blah, blah. And they were all so surprised to find out that she was dead. Now, before, again, we get into the death, we're going to keep going into a little more background.
Mm-hmm.
So after she resigned from the company she was working at and she moved to Paraty, she began working by teaching language classes. So maybe she was teaching French or English or whatever to the people in Brazil who speak Portuguese mainly. She continued working on like an old project. She actually created her own brand called Alba.
Okay.
Which is unisex clothing, which I think is like really in right now. But her thing stood out as it was very ecological, sustainable, and affordable.
Nice.
So she's trying to do her part in the world.
Sure.
Now, a graphic designer named Stefani Monsu said that him and Thalissa had shared an apartment for 2 years in 2016, and that she became like his younger sister, part of the family. She was spontaneous, impulsive, which doesn't add up to what other people were saying
That
in her work.
she was very planned, precise, punctual, all that stuff.
So we're unsure, right?
Okay.
We haven't talked to her family yet, as we've learned. Okay, we'll get there. So apparently she was very talented, and everyone was kind of like thinking she was gonna do great things one day, not, die.
Thank you.
So we are going to talk about the crime or death now. She was found, okay, her roommate that she lived with in Parody, they all went out drinking, and at about 11 p.m., she left the bar, went home. Her roommate got home later than her, went to sleep, not thinking anything. Next morning, though, about 10 a.m., she hadn't seen Thalissa yet. So the roommate, Vivian, went upstairs to check on Thalissa, and she found her with a plastic bag wrapped around her face and her hands tied behind her back.
So obviously murdered. I guess almost obviously. Someone could have done that to themselves, I guess.
It was ruled a suicide.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, it was ruled a suicide.
Whoa, that surprises me.
Now, the reason why is because they had obviously talked to friends and family.
Yeah.
And the friends knew that she kind of had some mental health stuff going on. Her family knew that she was depressed.
Okay.
And she had apparently suicide attempts in the past. So it wouldn't be shocking.
If she had succeeded.
Right?
Okay.
Seems kind of like a difficult way to suicide, though. Plastic bag around your head.
It's
and
not.
your hands chained behind your back.
It's
or
not
tied.
It's not typical, but it's possible, I guess, if you really want to look at it that way. I don't see, that wouldn't be my first thought. It would be a possibility, but that wouldn't be the first thing I would think.
Well, that's what it was ruled before the investigation was officially launched.
Is that how it works in Brazil? They
I
just
don't know.
decide what happened?
Well, I think it was ruled that before an investigation was even considered being opened.
But why
'Cause you don't
open
need-
an
you don't need
investigation
to-
at all?
Well, I'm saying you don't need to open an investigation if there's a suicide, but you do if you think there may have been a murder and they got more information, which is why an investigation was open. We'll get into that.
Okay.
So the friends that Thalissa was with while out drinking had explained to police, I guess later on, that she had injured herself at the bar, and they had to kind of patch her up. So I'm assuming she fell on the dance floor
she
or something.
fell or tripped or something.
And so maybe she was bleeding a little bit, bruised up, whatever. They patched her up and she left. And like I said, after failing to come downstairs, they found that she was dead upstairs.
Yeah.
Now, medics said that she had been dead for several hours, that she must have died somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m. Where things start to get a little weird.
I mean, the method in which she chose to commit suicide was pretty weird.
Right.
Allegedly.
So I guess they hadn't done an autopsy yet because this wasn't ruled a murder yet.
Okay.
Police checked CCTV footage and saw that several people did some questionable things that night and were taken into custody. Apparently,
After they watched the CCTV
yes,
TV footage.
Apparently, images and video showed some people following her outside of the bar when she left, following her home, having conversations with her outside of the bar that they had claimed never happened.
All right.
So things aren't really adding up, which is why many people are being, not arrested, but brought in for questioning. But they really didn't have a solid suspect. There wasn't a person to point out. Obviously, the roommate kind of was probably their number one suspect because she lived there.
Right.
So maybe she killed her. I don't know. Now, they finally got the autopsy done. Where did I put the autopsy. Here we go. So the autopsy reported that this could definitely have not been a suicide. This was a violent death, as they called it, caused by pulmonary congestion through mechanical asphyxia.
Mechanical?
Like an object.
So they found something in her throat?
It's not like she choked. It's like a bag was over her head, which, as we knew.
Yeah.
But the bag was held.
I see.
So clearly someone did this. Now, there were no signs of a break-in. There were no problems with the doors, locks. The windows were all fine. Nothing was going on. So now their one main suspect, looks pretty bad.
The roommate.
Looks pretty damning.
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta find where I put that part. I mixed
taking a long time.
I mixed my notes up into like a bunch of different like PDFs.
Why?
Because I'm retarded. I don't know.
Why do you do it like that?
Because normally I'm fine. Anyway, so investigators, I guess they have more research on this now. This case is still like, it hasn't even gone to trial yet. So there's not a whole bunch of information out.
When did you say this happened again?
This happened November of 2021.
2021. Okay. I mean, yeah.
And in March of 2022, Vivian Tibertino, the roommate, was in fact arrested. They said that they have probable cause. Mind you, this is paraphrasing because they word things very differently.
Yeah.
In Brazil, but probable cause, her being the only suspect at this point that could have done this.
But do they have any evidence at all that it could have been her besides the fact that she lives there?
I believe so.
They just haven't stated as much.
Because apparently the request for, and I don't know what this means, but preventative detention. I'm assuming that means kind of like maybe like a bail.
Like, preventative makes it sound, I don't know. My thought was like, does she have an alibi or something?
She doesn't.
I know, but in America, you wouldn't necessarily need one.
Well, CCTV footage shows Thalissa leaving the bar at like 11 and Vivian leaving the bar at like 11:30. Both of them going home.
To where they live.
No one else entering the home or even walking around their home.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so a judge denied her bail and they had her passport and her phone collected and apparently was held on like judicial authorization.
She can't leave the country or even her area.
The judge won't even let her go out on bail.
She's in prison right now. Well, jail.
Yes, she is in a Brazilian jail. Now, I'm assuming Brazilian law is similar enough to the US, right? Obviously, there's going to be some things different.
Of course.
But similar enough that arrested in March of 2022, we're only about a year after that now. Mm-hmm. I would assume that the trial would be between now and the next 6 months.
Okay.
So I have a Google alert on my phone for this, when it goes to trial so that we can get more updates as it goes. But I thought that was fucking wild that not that some girl was murdered, especially in Brazil, right?
Okay.
But that specific murder was ruled a suicide for like too long of a time.
I don't know.
Like, why did they rule it a suicide before they did an autopsy, before they checked CCTV footage?
I think that's weird.
They just jumped the gun on it.
But I don't know, like different countries will have different protocols. Like maybe they need to have like a first theory to go on before they evaluate, and then the evaluation begins. That's kind of how that sounded.
But if you see someone with their hands tied behind their back and a plastic bag wrapped around their head, you think, oh, this could have been a suicide.
No, I'm with you on that. Like I said as much, but devil's advocate, she could have. Like if they hadn't done the autopsy, and I mean, I wouldn't know what those signs would look like, but there hadn't been signs that someone did it to her. She didn't do it to herself. That is something you can do to yourself. Yeah, sure. You could. But like, did you ever see that movie? I don't remember what it was. What it was called, but it was the star of House of Cards, the guy who got fired because he was a creep.
Kevin Spacey?
Really good actor. Yeah. So Kevin Spacey, and then the blonde from Ozarks, the wife, Jason Bateman's wife.
Yes. It was that movie about like how they thought the death penalty was bullshit.
They thought the death penalty was bullshit, and they were like advocates against it, and they did a lot of like peaceful protests and had all this like legal knowledge, and I think they were both attorneys, but I'm not positive. Anyway, she dies in the movie because she kills herself by tying her hands behind her back, and like she had this method, she thought of this way to
I think it was similar. I think
make it look like she was framing
like duct taped plastic bag over her head.
something. She was able to do it herself somehow.
Yeah.
And then she set up a tripod camera so that they could release the footage after
he was sentenced to death.
After
the death sentence was followed through.
Yeah, after Kevin Spacey had died, that was when they had programmed the footage to be released because he insisted she had killed herself. He's like, no, she did it to herself. I was there. I watched it. And they couldn't, I don't know. They had all this proof that like the two of them had argued, and he was like, well, we're friends. Friends have fights. And they were like, didn't you guys, well, there were signs that you had sex. And he's like, well, yeah, we had sex before she died, but you were in the house. Yes, I was in the house. That kind of thing. Like it was just like it was a big demonstration, and they both decided they were going to literally die on that hill, that the death penalty was fucked up, and there was no way it was right every time. And they were killing a bunch of innocent people, basically. I honestly thought it was way too overdramatic, and
it's kind of a lot.
It was kind of silly, but it was kind of cool. Yeah, It was an interesting story, and obviously the acting was great. But yeah, that is exactly how she killed herself. She was completely naked, and they had sex right before they did it. So they like implied he had raped her or something. And she put a plastic bag over her head and zip tied her hands behind her back or something like that, so that she couldn't stop it, and she suffocated on camera that way. So based off of that fictional movie that is based off of something that didn't happen, I know that someone could possibly do that to themselves.
You could possibly do it to yourself, sure.
Yeah.
But she didn't. And I wouldn't think no one would. That movie's a perfect example. They saw her with a bag over her head and her hands tied behind her back, and they assumed murder immediately.
Well, that's why I thought the movie was so stupid.
You know what? Maybe the lead investigator had just watched that movie, and he was like, I know what this is.